Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host, Sree Iyer, and I have with me Simon Hunt and Alex Craner returning as we look at how the world is being reset by the big powers of the world. And you saw something happen in Ukraine, and now there is more activity in the Middle East. Are these two linked? Is there some sort of a morphing going on from one thing to the other? What exactly is going on? To make sense of all these things, we have our visitors, Simon Hunt and Alex Craner. Simon, Alex, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel. How are you?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me. Who did you say is starting? Alex.
Alex, you go first.
There's not a great deal of change in Ukraine other than that the situation is deteriorating for Ukraine and that the Russian position is gaining strength, and it's all going in the direction that we could have predicted 3 years ago. However, I think that significant changes are unfolding in the Middle East because we saw this is not new news, but I think after several weeks of truce of
Hamas and Israel
of ceasefire, we have a new war conflagration between Israel and Hamas, Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Israel with Ansarallah in Yemen. And we have Donald Trump's administration cutting their teeth in a series of moves that have many people scratching their heads, that are very, very difficult to understand. But you know, one thing that I spent my weekend reading up on is the exactly where, because I thought, okay, so this is really, really dumb on the part of the Trump administration what they're doing, but maybe there's a reason for it. And I knew that to some extent they have to kowtow to a very large segment of their political base, which is the Jewish Zionists and Christian evangelicals. And I was vaguely aware that there was a religious aspect to this conflict. I didn't quite understand how powerful this aspect is and how passionately people regard these things. So the Christian Zionists look at this as part of the end times prophecies, and their belief is that the creation of the state of Israel was necessary for the second coming of Christ, and that in the run-up to Armageddon, where Israel would be attacked by multiple armies from their neighbors, and that these armies are ultimately wielded by Antichrist, right? That it's Antichrist who is ultimately behind this attack on Israel. And that it's only going to be after the Armageddon that we will get the second coming of Christ. So it does appear that a very significant part of the American voting public believes that if somebody opposes Israel or isn't unconditionally supportive of Israel, that somebody might be Antichrist, which would be a very, very bad position for Donald Trump to be in. So I think, so like we're outside of the realm of rational. If you look at the conduct of the Israeli administration, of the Benjamin Netanyahu government, you could say, well, it's security, well, it's the gas, well, it's the control of the region, well, it's the greater Israel, it's the territories. And all of these considerations are rational. But there's a deeply irrational dimension to that too. not just in the Christian end time prophecies, but also in the Jewish end time prophecies, which are a little bit different, but still involve this basically Israel inviting punishment upon itself, provoking all its neighbors to attack it. Anyway, so these considerations are very deeply irrational, but at the same time, they translate into real political pressure upon the administration. So to show anything less than unconditional support for Israel, Trump would be risking to equate himself with Antichrist from people who are not rational about it, who are whose views on this whole situation are deeply religious and are held with a certain degree of passion and zeal. And so it would be enough for somebody to suggest, oh, Donald Trump is letting Israel go. He has turned against Israel. Therefore, he is Antichrist. How do you wash that stain? So I think that it may explain the deeply disappointing turn of events that Donald Trump's administration has taken in the Middle East. But at the same time, I have to say this as well. Even if we leave the analysis at the rational level, I think they've blundered very, very badly by bombing Yemen, because they have no way to prevail on this. It's almost like you've embarked on a big bluff with a pair of twos. And everybody in the region knows this. We have policy papers from the Pentagon dating back to 1991, which pretty much spell it out that American hegemony in the region rests on two pillars. One is their allies. The second one is power projection. And power projection basically amounts to these carrier strike groups, meaning that if some country in the region pretends that they will chart an independent course and that they will decline the diktat of the empire, then the Americans mobilize these carrier strike groups, not because they can actually wage war and prevail in the war. That's what the allies are for, primarily Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, and the Gulf state. Not because, so they're not sending these carrier strike groups there because they can prevail. They can drop a bunch of bombs, they can launch a bunch of missiles, but they can't fight a war and win a political settlement from that war. The whole thing is there only for intimidation purposes, so that you can scare any government there into subordination to you and to your demands. Well, that no longer works, because the Yemenis, the Ansar Allah, have large amounts of cheap drones that can quickly deplete anti-aircraft defense of these carrier strike groups, and they have hypersonic precision missiles that can sink ships, and they can strike at Israel, and they can strike at Saudi oil processing facilities and infrastructure, and that can disrupt maritime traffic through the Red Sea as well as through the gates of Hormuz. So the strategic situation has evolved to the point where, by engaging their adversaries militarily, Trump is only going to end up revealing of their ability to enforce their order militarily, which basically amounts to strategic defeat. All you're going to be able to do is tuck your tail and get out of the region. And we've seen that after the attack against the Houthis, they were not cowed, they were not intimidated, they didn't stop, they declared war on the United States, and on Israel. They've been launching attacks. The United States had to move their Harry Truman carrier strike groups 1,300 miles away from the Yemeni coast, and they had to send the second carrier strike group into the Red Sea. Now, sending the second carrier strike group is not a demonstration of strength. It is an admission of weakness. Everybody can see that. Now, Trump and everybody there, Hegseth and Marco Rubio, they can pound their chest and say, like, look how tough we are. But everybody else is seeing it for weakness. And everybody else knows that you have 96 anti-aircraft missiles on those destroyers, which you will deplete them if the enemy sends 96 or half as many cheap drones against your ships. And after that, you have to go to port to rearm your ships. You can't rearm them from anywhere else. Everybody knows that. If I know that, Ansar Allah knows this, the Iranians knows it, everybody knows it. So I think that they're blundering, and they're blundering so badly, it's so silly and dumb that I have to wonder, are they really that dumb, or are they playing dumb because they have some kind of a ulterior motive that will become apparent as events evolve?
Thank you so much, Alex. I'd like to park your thought at this moment, and then I'd like to defer to Simon. Simon, we are all sensing that there is a reset in progress. This is not a reset that takes 5 seconds like your laptop, but this is probably going to take some time. A global reset is happening. There's a lot of churn, and Alex referred to one such instance. How do you look at the events in the last couple of weeks, and go back in time, if you will, if you want to, because a couple of other things have also happened, right? Prince Charles is getting involved, whether he's meeting Zelensky in London or he's going somewhere, taking trips. This is the first time I'm seeing the British royalty being involved. What do you make of all this stuff?
That's a huge question. Where do I start? So let's carry on from Alex's super resume of what's going on in the Middle East. Just to add a few things that I've been looking at and thinking about. The first is that Israel is fighting a demographic war. There are something like 7.5 million Arabs in what used to be known as Palestine, and there are 7.5 million Jews. The way that Arabs produce children, within 20 years, the Jewish population will be overrun. So Netanyahu's policy is to remove all Arabs from Gaza and the West Bank into Jordan and Egypt, or at least those that remain. And I think it was very telling that, according to reports, that the Israeli government told in advance Washington that they were about to resume bombings in Gaza, which de facto, at the very minimum, means that Washington has turned a blind eye to what the IDF are doing. The second thing that concerns me is the attacks that are being made both by Lebanon on Syria and Syria on Lebanon, not widely reported. And in fact, Israel's continuous bombing of both Syria and Lebanon. You then have to ask the question, given Erdogan's massive domestic problems with his own citizens, is he going to lash out on Syria or Lebanon or Iraq or even Iran? I think that's something we need to watch very carefully. I agree with everything that Alex has said about the bombing of Houthis, the Houthis' reaction, and the implications for Iran. Iran has openly stated, well, first of all, Trump has openly stated that Iran is supporting the Houthis. Iran, in response, has said, you attack us and we will destroy all your bases in the Gulf. I think there's one interesting missing link, which is that we can suppose correctly that when Trump and Putin had their chat, that some of that time was spent on Iran. And I think we can correctly suppose that Putin said to Trump, I guarantee that Iran will not develop one or more nuclear bombs. Now that could be if Trump accepts that commitment, that will reduce tensions and he will be able to say, well, I have been able to negotiate with Iran that they are not going to develop a nuclear bomb. So with a little bit of luck, we could see a better outcome between America and Iran if he accepted that commitment, Putin's commitment. But there are other issues that Trump is playing. I think one of the most important is that there appears to be a policy from Washington of isolating and curtailing China's growth. And this, I think, rises because, not only because China has probably the most sophisticated and efficient manufacturing supply chain in the world, but that they are using the automation and robotic revolutions to make them that much more efficient. And their capacity is such that they can overrun the world. And I think that Trump's administration understands this, and that is why they are introducing so many strange policies to restrict China's growth, one of which actually happens to be, just to take one simple example, a series of events that will make it very difficult for China to import certain critical materials for their manufacturing industry, such as copper. So then if we turn to Ukraine, again, I suspect that Trump is turning a blind eye, or will turn a blind eye, towards Russia's using the spring and summer ground conditions to advance rapidly its main forces to the Dnieper River. They've got 300 forces in the north, which can move towards Kiev, and another 100 in the south to move towards Odessa. Don't forget that both Kiev and Odessa are Russian cities. These two events, in my mind, are only a small part of the big jigsaw puzzle of resetting the global order so that the risk of war can be reduced. The problem with this is that Trump seems to think that he can split the strategic relationship between China and Russia. I think that is unlikely. So until you can get the three superpowers sitting around a table to negotiate and discuss spheres of interest, it's not going to happen whilst at the same time you are doing your best to stop China from growing. So that's where I will leave my case for the moment.
Thank you so much, Simon. Very fresh perspective on this. Thank you so much. I'll get back to Alex. Alex, one question for you. I have been reading that, I do the same thing like you do, in the sense that keep reading to understand and get a perspective on what's happening, especially from regional vernacular sites and so on. So I have read that Israel has a new laser-based technology. It's far cheaper to intercept all these drones. And I thought they had already deployed them, because they, like you said, these anti-aircraft missiles cannot, it's too expensive. It's all coming from, as a US taxpayer, it's coming from my taxpayer money. Okay, you can make the argument that somebody is doing printing of the notes, but be that as it may. I thought there was some laser technology that could cheaply bring down these drones. True or not true?
I've seen footage. It looks phenomenal. It's really, really effective and very impressive. The only problem is that it comes from video games. So if they really had this, I'm pretty sure would see a lot of footage of it's doing its magic. I think it's psyops, and the logic of war is always that you have to discourage your enemies from shooting at you, and the way you discourage them is you pretend that you have magical weapons that can repel anything, that they're wasting their ammunition, that they will not achieve their objectives, and so forth. So the video games today are so convincing, they're so good that if you watch footage from video games, often it looks like it's a real thing. But I haven't seen any real footage of these amazing lasers. I just see that when the Iranians a few months ago launched a salvo of ballistic missiles and drones, that many of them hit their targets. So that's all I know about the magical lasers.
Simon, so we have broken the whole thing about lasers. That means it's a very expensive battle for the United States to go sit there and try to bring some order. And what Alex said, and I think what you mentioned, is that the population of Muslims in all these countries is exploding. The fertility rate is around 3.3 at least. It's only trending up. Now, let's for the moment say that, somehow from the river to the sea happens. I'm not going to dwell into it. From the river to the sea happens. Okay, then what? There are already problems in Europe. And they have singularly proven wherever they've been that they are not capable of managing themselves. They're not capable of administering themselves. War. When there is nobody to fight, within your religion, they start fighting. Sunnis against Shias and Sunnis against this and that. The numerical superiority in any area tries to take on the smaller segment. Where do you see this thing headed? I mean, Erdogan, I don't even know where he is. His whereabouts are not known right now after that uprising in Istanbul. So tell me a little bit, what exactly is going through? Who is the leader in all these things? I mean, procreation is great, but if you can't bring food to the table, how can you manage families of 10 children?
Wow, where do I start? Economically and geopolitically, the world is very unstable. It's going to become even more unstable as some of the conflicts in the world escalate much further. And one part that we've not actually been talking about that I think is going to become extremely important later this year and in 2026, 2027 is the Arctic. Big plays being made there. Some of the islands, I've forgotten the name of the island, is highly important for detecting missiles as an early stage. It's an island owned by Norway. As we know, China and Russia have been developing operations in the Arctic for many years. And it's only now that Trump's administration, in their pre-planning months, have recognized this. Hence his wish to own Greenland. I think that's part of the world that we need to focus on. But I think this all comes back to what the heck are financial markets going to do in the next few years, and the dollar, of course. First of all, since the dollar was the subject of this discussion, I'll give you my views. I think that the dollar is increasingly becoming seen by so many countries as a unit of America's foreign policy. Thus, if you don't do what we want you to do, we're going to freeze your assets or whatever. So I think that the dollar may have an initial pickup over the next month or so. I'm talking about the dollar index, maybe up to 110. And I think that the dollar index will start falling sharply, probably to hit 90 next year and 70 in 2027. Then beyond that, we see it bottoming at around 50 from where it is today at 108. What are the consequences of this? Obviously, a falling dollar, and given what is likely to be the impact of tariffs and increasing escalations of war, we will see probably starting in 2026, oil prices beginning to rise. Food prices will be soaring because of long-term weather conditions. So we're going to see a resurgence of inflation. What does that mean? It means that the bond vigilantes will be out in force. It looks, what's happening in US inflation, CPI, is tracking very closely what happened in the 1970s and early 1980s. And that is likely to continue, which means that by 2028, you're going to see US CPI at around 13%, and global inflation around 15%. What does that mean to long bond yields? 10-year treasuries won't be yielding 4, 5, 6% as they did in 1981. They'll be in big double figures. What does that do to a highly indebted system? Crash. Unless before then, the powers that be come up with some alternative, such as the one that is being discussed at the moment, of somehow linking Bitcoin into the US dollar, which from my banking friends say will only end in more selling of US dollars. But I think the risk of rising inflation, rising bond yields, and a crash around 2027, 2028 is very real. So what do equity markets do? Our scenario is that the world will go into, well, will be in recession until early in the fourth quarter of this year. Then we get a rebound because of fiscal and monetary policies, but they won't last long. Hopefully they will last through 2026 and into 2027. And that's when all hell breaks out. So I'm afraid I'm not painting a happy picture, but my advice is it's an environment to trade in. It is not an environment to invest in.
Thank you so much. But you didn't tell me your thoughts on this population explosion that is being attempted by one community. I mean, I just don't understand. What is it that they don't get it here? Don't we all want a better future for our children, which means you need to have a smaller family? I'm just asking a direct question, Simon, a rhetorical question.
Well, basically, the Muslim fraternity populate themselves far more than the Christians, or in this case, the Jews do. Just look at the demographics.
I'm afraid the scenario is a little discouraging, because you may win a few battles here and there, but you're not winning the war. That's the sense
Correct.
I'm getting from talking to both of you gentlemen.